my philosophy has always been about what can increase the gains and get me the healthiest possible. And this is what really caught my eye about this, because I was citing, unbeknownst to myself, what you had popularized, which was that ice baths are actually potentially harmful post-workout for the gains, that they can actually blunt the recovery response or the testosterone response, but pre-cooling or before can massively accelerate. So tell me a little bit more about that story, because it's not a free pass completely with cold plunging, right? There's a little bit of delicacy with the timing and when you do it, depending on what your goals are.
For men especially, a little bit of exercise after your cold plunge has huge metabolic, anabolic benefits. The best work that I've seen is coming out of Stanford. It's Craig Heller's lab. And Huberman had him on. And he was asking about this term called per-cooling. So pre-cooling is you cool before your exercise. And then you could post-cool, you do an ice bath after your workout. Per-cooling is when you're doing heat extraction, cooling between sets. Mm-hmm. And this is what Heller did. He devised a machine in which you insert your hands. It applies a vacuum so that the blood will stay circulating through your hands, and it extracts heat through the palms. When he tested both highly trained, so these were pro athletes, and just young men who weren't trained, but he tested this per-cooling effect. It's called CoolKnit. You can buy it online. He saw enormous gains in peak muscle output and in endurance. Physiologically, it makes sense. Your mitochondria are producing the ATP on which your muscles depend. Exercise relies on mitochondria. And if your mitochondria get overheated, then fatigue sets in. This is your body's way of protecting the mitochondria from damage, making it physiologically and psychologically more difficult to continue the exercise, because too much of a good thing is too much, turns into a bad thing. This is the classic upside down view of the hormetic stress curve. So fatigue is your body's way of protecting the mitochondria. When you extract heat from the body, the mitochondria just keep going. They no longer reach that edge of risk at which you must feel fatigue to keep them protected. So pre-cooling is one way of extending your endurance, that is postponing fatigue, boosting peak muscle output. And per-cooling in between the sets is another way of extracting that excess heat from the body so that you can produce more energy. But post-cooling doesn't do it. You are far better off after your workout doing a sauna than you are to do cooling. One sort of triple stack that has not been investigated in the scientific literature is pre-cooling with the cold, and then exercise, and then post-exercise recovery with the sauna. We know that sauna after exercise is beneficial. We know that pre-cooling exercise is beneficial, but nobody yet has done the study where they all three to see, what sort of gains are available when you really tune your thermal contrast therapy to your exercise. I suspect that there's more to be found there. And I suspect this just because of the narrative. How did it work? Your ancient ancestors would get up in the morning and they'd be hungry, and they'd go fishing, and they'd go into the water, and they would gather the shellfish or the whatever they're going to eat. And then what would they do? Well, they would walk back to wherever they live, and they would build a fire, and they would cook, and they would eat. There's a certain sequence of things that we are naturally attuned for. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if there was, in this triple stack, cold, exercise, sauna, more gains to be found.
All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.